Got it.
Yeah. Our YouTube followers would be devastated.
They're all waiting.
And so just a couple of things. I was talking with Brother Boyle in the back, and some of you might be looking at us and wondering which one of us you're going to work with, right? Or like some of you were at UBU last in 471 with Brother Hunt, and now he's at BYU, and so we haven't really said this, but Brother Hunt, are you okay with me saying it to everybody?
Sure.
So what we've decided to do this year, we're really excited about it, is all three of us are going to, once you get to this point, all three of us are going to work with and observe and do that with every student teacher. And so, you know, the logistics you don't have to worry about, but we've worked out a system where we'll kind of systematically move through those student teachers, and we all three get to observe and give feedback and spend time with each of you. So it has felt a little bit awkward in the past that for those who were at UBU last year, for example, like we would train in our 471 meetings, but that's really the only time we ever saw the UVU students sometimes, the UVU student teachers. And so so we've decided to make that change. And so at this point, no matter what group you came through, we're all three are pre-service trainers and are really excited about that, and are excited to get around and see everybody. So anything you would add to that, Brother Hunt?
Just something that we recognize as a potential problem with it that we want, that I think would be helpful for you. So let's say that you're observed by one of us 1 week, and 2 weeks later, one of us comes and says something that sounds like it's completely the opposite of what you were told 2 weeks before. That can be really frustrating because you're like, well, who do I listen to then?
And that's me.
No, it's true. Listen to Chuck.
That's funny because it's true. That actually could happen if the same pre-service trainer watched you 2 weeks later. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Because you're obedient and you're responsive. And that's exactly what we need you to be. But because of that, we'll talk at one point with you about the Mombasa Highway, about going off one side of the highway because you were trying to avoid going off the other side. And sometimes we'll give you feedback, and you might be responding to that feedback myopically. And the other pre-service trainer will be coming in and saying, okay, let's pull back now a little bit. So that we realize that having three different eyes on you could feel frustrating because you'll hear these different perspectives. It will ultimately be beneficial. I hope you'll feel that. And we'll be talking, we'll be communicating back and forth about what's being shared, and we really feel like it's going to be a blessing. There would be times where, because I was alone at UVU, where I would send an email to Brother Martin, Brother Robbins, and say, could you please come watch so-and-so? Because I want another set of eyes on them, and it's really, there is safety and counsel, and this helps with that. So.
Well, it's also exciting for me just because one of our favorite parts of the job is getting to know you. Like, you're our students, and we came from high schools, and you know, where we had our 150 students, and we loved them, and we, you know, and got to know them, and you're our students. And it does feel weird to have, as a BYU, you know, 10 students that I really don't know, and then 20 that I know, like, how's Johnny doing? He's teething still, you know, like, and there's kind of this, and so we're excited to get to know you, and anyway, so just so you're aware, now that you're at this point, we're all your trainers. You can approach any one of us. You don't have to feel like, you know, Brother Boyle has strengths that I don't have, and Brother Hunt has strengths, and it's okay to approach one and say, you trained on this, and I had a question about this, and you don't have to feel like there's some assigned person that you're supposed to talk to. Just, we're all willing to help you. Okay? All right, so anything you would add to that, Brother Boyle? Okay. So, what I'm going to do for the next hour with you is, in some ways, Brother Robbins, Brian Robbins, and maybe a few others have seen me do this before. We're going to do it together. But one thing we've noticed is that though you've taught the gospel and you've done a lot of things, and sometimes you're wondering, how do I prepare a lesson? And how do I do so efficiently? Because if I spend the amount of time preparing every lesson that I spent on my practicum lessons, I will die and starve. And you know what I'm saying? Okay, we had, some of you spent upwards of 3-4 hours on preparing lessons for your practicum. And you might be looking forward and going, okay, this is going to be the hardest experience of my life. And so while I will say this, there is a learning curve and you will become more efficient, there's also some ways that we can help you to hit the ground running and be a little bit more efficient in your preparation. Now, I didn't want to come in having a chapter in my head that I'm going to prepare with you, because that would be unfair if I did all of this preparation. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do all this preparation, then come in and act like it only took me 45 minutes to prepare something, when in actuality I'd done an hour and a half, 2 hours of back work. So, I'm not a magician, but this will feel kind of like a magic trick. Just a number between 1 and 160. Just give me
51.
What's
51.
51. Okay. As long as that's not Jacob 5, we are good. We're safe. I was sitting there thinking, okay, there are some lessons that will take longer than others. In Jacob 5, we can't read in 45 minutes. Okay, so in the curriculum, lesson 51 is Words of Mormon through Mosiah chapter 1. So let's turn there together, okay? Words of Mormon through Mosiah chapter 1. A couple of years ago, our former associate administrator, his name is Brother Haas, and he's now moved on and is the director of curriculum, is that right?
Correlation.
Of correlation for the church. He gave a talk called Seek First to Obtain My Word. And some of you are familiar with that from 471. The talk had 101 cross-references, citations. The citations were as long as the talk when you print it off, which shows you why they might have him in charge of correlation. Like everything was like, anyway. But in that, he gave us a little 5-step guide to prepare. And there's just a few tips that I would say from the outset before we just prepare this together, okay? Tip number 1 is, you know the fundamental outcomes of gospel teaching and learning, right? Tell me what they are. The first one is to understand context and content. Then what? Identify a principle. Understand the principle. Feel the truth and importance of the principle by the power of the Holy Ghost, okay? And apply those gospel principles, doctrines. If you're going to teach in that way, it would make sense to do what? Study and prepare with those things in mind. Okay, and you'll see that pattern here. Okay? So the first thing, and for our purposes today, let's focus heavily in Words of Mormon. Okay? So if you'll turn to Words of Mormon with me. The first thing, someone read number 1. Cameron, go ahead.
Pick a passage, read it, and ask yourself, what are the details of the passage? Underline the people, the places, the timing, and the storyline. Look at the larger context for the passage and underline all the contextual detail that you can find. As our handbook suggests, note the natural breaks for the tone or
So here's what we're doing. I want to know what everything means. I want to know who the people are. I want to know the places. I want to know, and I'm also looking for natural breaks. In other words, where it seems like, he uses the word things shift. Okay, they're going to make a different point here. So let's go into it, and I'm not going to act like there's a thinking bubble here, but I am going to try to make this efficient. You do understand the reason why I'm only going to do Words of Mormon instead of Words of Mormon and Mosiah 1 is the conversation we'll have throughout is going to take more time. Does that make sense than it would personally if I was just doing it in my office? So we'll do Words of Mormon, okay? And first, I want to know if you have your Gospel Library app, you could pull up the curriculum. And every now and then, one thing I like to do is I like to read any of the introductory material to the verses, okay, the context. And so it's lesson 51, gospel teaching, teacher curriculum. Who's there? Anyone there yet? Yeah, in the curriculum. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrea, and read.
Exactly is it you want me to read?
See the introduction in the
Oh,
box
yeah.
there? Just go ahead and give us a little introduction.
The book titled Words of Mormon serves as a bridge between the small plates of Nephi and Mormon's abridgment of the large plates of Nephi. In this book, which Mormon wrote almost 400 years after the birth of Jesus Christ, Mormon explained that he sought direction from God and was guided by the Holy Spirit about what to include in his record. He also mentioned King Benjamin and gave valuable insights about why King Benjamin had such a great influence on his people. Mosiah 1 contains some of King Benjamin's teachings to his sons. He taught them that the scriptures help us remember God and keep his commandments.
Okay, so what is important for the students to know from that, do you think? Words of Mormon, what's important about it that you see in there? What might you want to point out to them? Yeah.
Well, it's not in chronological order, like it's way at the end, and this is Mormon saying like, hey, this is a transition.
Yeah, and this is why I've included these, and awesome. So this is where 116 manuscripts, all that stuff comes into play, right? Okay, awesome. So with that, let's just go in and start reading the Words of Mormon, okay? And if you skip the chapter headings, you're skipping something that's really going to be a blessing to you.
Just a quick question. I'm on the church website, lds.org, trying to find the manual.
Okay, go to Serve and Teach.
Yeah, I got there, but it only goes to lesson 49.
What you need to do, so if you go back, click on See All Courses in Manual, and then go to the Book of Mormon one, and then it will give you the right one.
Okay.
Shouldn't it also be Gospel?
It is in Gospel
Yeah,
Library.
it might be easier to get to.
Well, he's on his.
Oh, okay.
That's true.
Do we need to do an earlier lesson, or will it let
No,
everyone?
no,
get
that's
there?
fine. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna go in and read Words of Mormon. Can we start over here, just read verse 1, and I'm gonna think out loud, or read the chapter heading.
Yep.
Yep.
Mormon abridges the large plates of Nephi. He puts the small plates with the other plates. King Benjamin establishes peace in the land, about 385 AD.
Now remember what we're gonna do. We're looking for people, places, natural breaks. We wanna understand everything that's going on in here, okay? Go ahead, Lacey.
And now I, Mormon, being about to deliver up the record which I have been moving into the hands of my son Moroni, behold, I have witnessed almost all the destruction of my people, the Nephites.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it is many hundred years after the coming of Christ that I deliver these records into the hands of my son. And it supposeth me that he will witness the entire destruction of my people. But may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them, and somewhat concerning Christ, that perhaps someday it may profit them.
So, as I'm looking at this, if I'm preparing, there's really some great contextual stuff in here to make them understand what's going on, right? And so I'm going to mark, Mormon is about to deliver up the record to his son. He's almost witnessed the entire destruction of his people. Christ has come. And he's given it to him, and so he can write a few more things. What are those few more things going to end up being? Okay. I mean, the Book of Moroni, okay? And we know all that's in there, okay? But he wants them to tell about Christ, that someday it may profit them and help them. So you kind of get this feeling of, could you imagine being Moroni? It's hard not to go into teacher mode, but this is how I would prepare, okay? Like, I'm just about to deliver up these plates to my son before I die, and I think he's going to witness the extinction of my people, okay? And so he's given them those plates. That's verse 1 and 2. Anything we don't understand in verse 1 and 2. We understand all the people involved, all the places, okay? So I think I'm good there, all right? Let's keep going. Go ahead, Joseph. Oh, yeah, where are you?
In what verse?
Verse 3. Now we're in 3.
And now I speak somewhat concerning that which I have written. For after I had made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi, down to the reign of this king Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates, which contained this small account of the prophets, from Jacob down to the reign of this king Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi.
What do we have in there that causes you to have a question? What's that? Nothing? Are we all clear on that? Go ahead.
So, my question is, so it says Amaleki, not too familiar with that.
Yeah, where is that?
And then, when did he speak of King Benjamin?
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you talked about it last one, but it would be good to like mention, you know, like, who these people are and talk about like too, like he literally just like insert small plates and now he's, you know, preparing to give us his version, kind of make that a little more clear, like what he's referring to is everything we just read, and Malachi was referencing Omni, and like kind of delineating who all these people are, and hopefully they got it in the last lesson, but just as like a nice refresher, this is where we're at.
Okay, so if you don't know, let's say we're sitting there going, how many of you, be honest, how many of you read that, like, reign down of this King Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which have been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates. Like, how many of you didn't know, like, when did Amaleki speak of King Benjamin? So what would you do to find that out?
Turn back
Okay,
one
search
page.
for it. So you said it was where?
In the previous chapter.
Okay.
Probably, if you didn't know that though, you might wanna just go to the index
Yeah,
and
if you
triple,
don't know, if you don't
and
know.
look up the name and see
Okay.
where it might be.
So then we go back one chapter, and I just want to see what he said. Okay? So
Verse 23.
verse 23. And let's read verse 23.
Notice
Go ahead.
notice verse 12, because there's the speaker.
Okay?
Okay, so that's where he begins, but you're right. He's still speaking in 23.
Okay. So he says, let's figure out who, now we've just taught this the day before, right? So you'd be a little more familiar than just hitting it cold like we just did, okay? But that's where he is. So Amaleki spoke of King Benjamin. In my preparation right now, I'm not going to take a ton of time to get into the intricacies of this because I'm not sure that it would be worth my time, especially if we taught it the day before. Okay. So let's go back. We know in Omni he spoke of King Benjamin. Let's keep going.
So do you want to read?
Verse 4. Just read.
And the things which are upon these plates pleasing me because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my fathers knowing that many of them have been fulfilled. Yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass.
Okay, so what are these plates?
The small plates.
The small plates,
second-
right?
Yeah. The
And
original-
so a lot of the things that we've studied as a class up to these points, he says, I like these plates because the prophecies of the coming of Christ and my fathers, knowing that many of them have been fulfilled. So I have seen this happen. And so I love these plates. I want to include them. Okay?
I love this verse because you just learned all about like the small plates, kind of what you're saying. There's so many cool prophecies in here, and like Jerusalem was going to be destroyed, but it's like preparing for the coming of Christ and everything. And then he starts off by saying, Christ has already come. This is several hundred years later, and now I'm witnessing the entire destruction of people. And you're like, what the heck happened between here and there?
It's my favorite moment in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
When he says that.
Yeah, because then it's like I have to read the rest of this, like find out what happened here, like in the next like 400 years.
Okay, so this is, I mean, if you imagine being Joseph, okay, now, I mean, so here you have these Mormon coming back. Would you want to point that out to your students? Like, so here's Mormon saying, I'm going to hand these over to my son. He'll probably watch my people be completely exterminated. But I love these little plates because they prophesy to the coming of Christ. And I have lived long enough now and seen that the prophecies concerning Christ and concerning my fathers have really come to pass. So I want to include these little plates. Right? Joseph?
So that brought up a context question for me, because he's talking like he's just about to turn the plates over to Moroni, but we have all of Alma and Helaman and 3rd Nephi that Mormons still continue to do. So did he come back after having abridged the entire thing and stick this in, just the words of Mormon?
It's, well,
because he said after he abridged the first part, that's when he found the little plates.
Yeah, so where would we find all this?
Well, one thing that's important to know is where Joseph Smith started translating. After the 116 pages, the first thing he translated was Mosiah 1. And he went through, and then at the end of Moroni 10, he went back and started with 1st Nephi and went through. And as I understand it, I don't know for sure, but the words of Mormon was the last thing Joseph Smith translated Mormon, but I might be wrong.
Brother Robbins will know. What do you think, Brother Robbins?
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. And so if we go back, let's just take a look. There is the explanation of the plates, right? So Lacey, do you have it?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, brief explanation about the Book of Mormon. Okay? So let's just be really familiar with it. Why would you want to do this in your preparation, man? Okay? Because if you're sitting there and all scattered, and if you can organize it, okay, and we'll talk about this, but we want this clear in our minds, right? So let's get it clear. Go ahead, Lacey.
So, a brief explanation of the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is a sacred record of peoples in ancient America, and was engraven upon sheets of metal. 4 kinds of metal record plates are spoken of in the book itself. 1, the plates of Nephi, which were of 2 kinds, the small plates and the large plates. The former were more particularly devoted to the spiritual matters and the ministry and teachings of the prophets, while the latter were occupied mostly by a secular history of the peoples concerned. From the time of Mosiah, however, the large plates also included items of major spiritual importance. 2, the plates of Mormon, which consist of an abridgment of Mormon from the large plates of Nephi, with many commentaries. These plates also contained a continuation of the history by Mormon and additions of his son Moroni. 3, the plates of Ether, which present a history of the Jaredites. This record was abridged by Moroni, who inserted comments of his own and incorporated the record with the general history under the title Book of Ether. And 4, the plates of brass brought by the people of Lehi from Jerusalem in 600 BC. These contain the 5 books of Moses, and also a record of the Jews from the beginning, down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, and also the prophecies of the holy prophets. Many quotations from these plates citing Isaiah and other biblical and non-biblical prophets appear in the Book of Mormon.
Okay. So let's get this very clear in our mind. There was 2 plates of Nephi, right? Large plates, small plates. They were some of the plates that Mormon took and abridged the Book of Mormon, right? There was the 116 lost pages that came from that. So where we are right now, those 116 pages came from the abridgment of the large plates of Nephi. Not the large plates of Nephi, but the abridgment of the large plates of Nephi. And now those are, and he says, oh man, these small plates are so awesome and have so many prophecies that I've seen fulfilled by my fathers. And so I'm going to tack these on. The small plates of Nephi. I've abridged the large plates, but these are so good, I need to stick these in there as well. And then he goes on, and then Moroni abridges the book of Ether and adds his own comments. Okay? So we got that all clear in our mind. And Mormon puts in the Book of Mormon, the words of Mormon, to explain why I'm putting these small plates here. Right? Okay. So are we all clear on, like, how many of you would feel right now clear standing in front of your students and they're like, wait, what's going on? Okay? That, I would feel pretty good.
Can I
Yeah.
show them something fun? This might, for kids, this will really help you, okay? Large plates, help me? Small plates, okay? Mormon found the small plates, and where did he put it chronologically? We know. Right behind the book of Lehi. And then he said, you know, a lot of people are going to wonder why. You got a piece of paper? You just need a piece of paper. That'll be good. They're going to wonder why I did that, so I'm going to write this and call it the words of what? Mormon. Here we go. So, translation begins. What did we lose? Nothing. See that? So there's your what?
Small plates.
Give me the books. First and second, books of Nephi, Jacob, Enos, Jeremiah,
Words of Mormon and Mosiah.
and then, oh, we probably ought to add Ether and Moroni. So you can do it with scriptures. You can help your kids see that visually with scriptures. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's perfect.
No, that's beautiful.
Okay? So, what we just saw is going next door like, hey, how are you going to explain this to your kids? And having a teacher be like, it's easy. Yeah, you know, right? Okay?
I think you're also seeing in that there's a tendency as we're moving through, we've taught you to prepare a lesson by going through, looking for these breaks. We're talking about deciding what to teach. But it's pretty natural that as you're finding some of those things, ideas will start popping in about how to teach as well. And it's great to make note of some of those things.
Yeah.
There's a video about the different plates
Yeah.
and how they all came together. It's about 11 minutes long.
That's awesome.
It's called For a Wise Purpose. It's in the LDS Media Library. If I'm preparing this lesson and I come to this part, I'm just going to scribble down a note for a wise purpose, to find it later, and then I'd move on in my preparation to decide, what else I'm going to teach. But I have that there as a whole.
And that's in the curriculum, I'm sure. I don't know, because I'm purposely waiting to go to the curriculum for Brother Haas. And so we'll see some of those resources and things when we go there. Okay, but are we clear on 1 through 4? Like what's going on? How many of you, like if I were to ask you right now, can you explain verses 1 through 4 in the Words of Mormon to me? How many of you would feel pretty comfortable? Okay, so we're good, right? Let's go on. Let's see what else is in there. Go ahead. Verse 5.
Wherefore I chose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people.
Can I give one more simple suggestion? So sorry.
You're fine.
Forgive me. It'll be really helpful to your kids if you'll start using large, small. So if you read verse 5, I chose those things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from...
Large.
Good. Yeah, and just do that. If you'll put LG or SM in your scriptures, that is so helpful for kids because they don't understand large and small. They just see plates, plates, plates. Oh my word, we're taking these plates to put with these plates. And that sorry for the time, but that's really worth it.
That's
Let's do
great.
it.
That's awesome. Okay.
In that question, so these things in the first part of verse 5, that's small plates, and then the plates of Nephi is referring to large plates, right?
So, for example, look at 3. And now I would somewhat speak that which I have written, for after I made an abridgment of the
Large.
good, I found these small, there you go, and if you turn the page, well, you can just see it again. Verse 6, behold, I shall take these small, right? And verse 10, I've delivered up these small to Benjamin, and he took them and put them with the, well, yeah, it's just a little, just that'll really help students.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's keep going with verse 5. Okay? Have we read all of verse 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so one thing that I want to point out to my students that I'm marking in my scriptures, I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people. There are a lot of things we don't need. So these things in verse 5 are what? Small. I'm including these small plates to finish my record upon them, which the remainder of my record I shall take from the large plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people. Okay, let's pick up there. Andrew. Verse 6.
But behold, I shall take these plates which contain these prophecies and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brethren. And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me, according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things, which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will.
So verse 7 is pretty awesome. Okay, and for me, I think I'm just going to mark. I see. I understand verse 7. I'm going to come back to it here in a second, but it seems to me to be a critical verse. Okay. Let's read verse 8. Go ahead.
And my prayer to God is concerning my brethren, that they may once again come to the knowledge of God, yea, the redemption of Christ, that they may once again be a delightsome people.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Now I, Mormon, proceed to finish out my record, which I take from the plates of Nephi, and I make it according to the knowledge and understanding which God has given me.
So it seems to be we're seeing a natural break there. Okay, so 1 through 9, or 1 through 8 is, okay, I love my people. They're almost entirely destroyed. I found these small plates. I want to include them. I don't know why, but the Spirit told me to. I hope they help someone in the future, particularly my brethren. And now he's going to go on to speak about some other things. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just something, so when you said like you marked the scripture to come back to it, like how, I know everyone has like different ways of marking their scriptures, but how do you like stick a little sticky note or just like?
Oh, I just would like be marking it.
Okay.
I mean, I think verse 7 would be pretty heavily marked in my script. That's what I meant. But
Okay.
can't really see it. Yeah. Okay, now, I'm going to stop there for a second. Well, let's just keep going. So, verse 1 through 8 is a section for me, a natural break. Okay, let's go ahead and see what's in 9 through 18. All right, go ahead. Where are we?
Just have, right? We broke it down.
Yeah, go ahead. 10.
Joseph. Wherefore it came to pass that after Malachi had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he took them and put them with the other plates which contain record which had been handed down from the kings, by the kings, from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin.
Okay, so let's get our these in the. Okay, wherefore it came to pass that after Amaleki had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin. What plates are those? Okay. He took them and put them with the other plates. Okay. which contain the records which have been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin. Okay, so Malachi includes the small plates with the large plates, and hands them over to King Benjamin. Okay, 11. Go ahead, Tanner.
And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they have fallen into my hands. And I, Mormon, pray to God that they may be preserved from this time henceforth. And I know that they will be preserved, for there are great things written upon them, out of which my people and their brethren shall be judged at the great and last day, according to the word of God which is written.
And they, it switched from these, now it's they, so which plates are it referring to? And now the small plates from King Benjamin on are kind of included with the passing down, it seems like, right? Okay? Yeah, well, I mean, anything we have questions about in verse 11? And I'm not saying there are questions, I'm just wondering. Go ahead, Anthony.
Did Nephi have the large plates when he came across the seas? He did, didn't he? He had the large and the small.
It seems to me he had the brass plates. I have in my scriptures that he wrote the small plates 30 years after his family, or I'm sorry, the large plates 30 years after his family left Jerusalem. So it seems to be retrospective. I don't know, maybe large plates, because we don't have exactly what was said, but my understanding was he wrote the plates after the whole experience, but I don't know if we know.
That's fair enough. I'm just saying the question that I would have is, and this will lead into what do we have coming for us? What are these great things written upon them, out of which the people and their brethren shall be judged?
That would be a good, in our preparation, right? We're thinking, okay, so, but what do we know? I mean, from verse, tell me about the significance of the Book of Mormon, from verse 11.
Very significant, and then the material by which the brethren shall be judged at the great and last day.
So I mean, that's something that I would, I'm marking in mine, okay? As I'm going through with my first read. Let's read 12.
Can I really briefly ask a question? So one of my biggest weaknesses is going a little too deep when preparing here. So like, when I got to this verse, I would, stand back and try to make a record of all the kings that would have added or something like this.
They will not care.
Yeah, I know they won't care, like, but I did, right?
Which is great,
Yeah.
and it's great. But one thing we're focusing on a little bit here is efficiency as well. Now, if you want to spend the time, but let's say you only have 2 hours, an hour and a half to prepare a lesson. Do you want to spend 45 minutes of it tracking down all the kings? And if so, I will tell you what happens. Brother Knowlton, who teaches here at the Institute, tells this great story of when he got dressed up in all of the garb of Old Testament and New Testament, just with phylacteries and all this stuff. And he'd spend all this time putting together this outfit and how to put it on and all this stuff. Gets in front of his class and dresses, and he gets done, and he's like, that's all I got. Like, he hadn't even really studied the chapter because he was spending so much time getting the clothing and everything right, and he forgot about even what was going on in the chapter. There are times where, out of curiosity, we might say, who are all the, okay, I want to know all the kings. What you need to do is judge, is this worth my time? Because I could tell you, and for you, that might be interesting. If you're handing out a handout to the kids, like, man, I spent so much time on this, and here's all the kings he was talking about. If you want to put this glue in him, they might glue it in, but cost benefit, like, I don't know if they're going to, if that's going to be spiritually moving at all. And so sometimes when you're going through content, don't try to teach the obvious. Discover the obvious. Sometimes I think there's a occupational hazard with seminary teachers that they want to be the first one to discover something new and teach it. And I was in a class, and I've mentioned this maybe in 471, but it's an example. You know what's in Alma 11, right? Resurrection, and every limb and joint shall be restored to its proper frame, even as we now are at this time, and we shall be brought to stand before God. Teach that. And I was in a class where I watched a teacher who wanted to talk about why it is so important that we're resurrected before we're judged. And he was asking his kids, why is it so important we're resurrected before we're judged? Why is that so, and he had done all this stuff and had all these quotes. What the kids needed from Alma 11, and they could care less, by the way. And when he was asking, I was in the back observing, and I had my head down, so I was like, I hope he doesn't ask me, because I don't know. But what the kids need to know is that every limb and joint will be restored to its proper frame. That we'll be brought to stand before God. That we'll know, even as we know now, and have a bright recollection of all of our guilt. Not some nuanced read-in thing to Alma 11, just Alma 11. And so a danger in preparing is, we're going through this, and I'm not saying anything, I would do what you did too. Okay, so this isn't like personal study, I'm not talking about that. In verses 1 through 9, where's the meat of verses 1 through 9? Verse 7's where it's at, right? Like, we can't get into getting bogged down in all these things, all these kingdoms, small places, large places. Like, I would try to be concise with that so we could bring him to something that's spiritually impactful in verse 7. Okay? And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me. We're going to talk about this in a second, but do you see what I'm saying? So my only advice would be, don't get bogged down when you're doing the what. Like, really dig into it and understand what it's saying. But look for the obvious of what they're saying. Maybe not just teach the obvious would be my advice, and try to discover the obvious. I don't know if I said that well, but Brother Hunt, Brother Boyle, is there anything you'd add to that? So, Josh.
I was just gonna say really quick, the question that came before about like when you start, if you had the plates when you came over, in 1 Nephi 19:1, it talks about once they got to the promised land, then he made the plates and started breaking up the records.
Awesome. You said in 19:1?
Yeah, 1 Nephi 19:1.
I can go back and look at it. Doesn't 1 Nephi 9 say that he made the small and large plates? Sorry, but it does. I think it's in context.
Well, it is, but one key that comes up is in the beginning chapters, he talks about my people. And he's already got a knowledge that he has a people rather than just his family.
I was just going to say, because sometimes there are huge lessons we can learn from things like that, but if there's something important to teenagers, they've already put it in the curriculum, which is why that's step number 5. Like, it asks us...
We might get to step number 5.
Maybe. But I'm just saying, like, there's disorders for a reason, because you'll have that question, you'll be like, that would probably be important to know, write it down. If it shows up in the curriculum, go for it. If it's not there, don't worry about it. It's because I've done that, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't in there, that's probably why I missed that.
Well, I think one thing you said that helps me a lot with what my problem was is how you talked about make sure that this isn't a personal study. Because like I can spend 12 hours if I want to on the other stuff, but this is the preparation study for the lesson.
Yeah.
It's important to differentiate.
And I am not putting some damper on digging into scriptures and understanding every aspect of it at all. All I'm saying is sometimes we're spending 5 hours, then we come in. Brother Boyle was with me when I was really excited to teach this lesson, a particular lesson, Nephi's closing words, and I saw this beautiful thread that went throughout the whole thing, and I wanted them to discover not just feast upon the words of Christ, for behold, the words of Christ will tell you all things you should do, and all those beautiful things, and I wanted them to see the thread So I tried to show them this thread from 1 Nephi 27 through 1 Nephi 33 at the expense of teaching them. And it fell so flat on its face. And it was this personal, cool thing to me. But as I taught them that, I didn't teach them, all those things that you know what are in for 2 Nephi 30, 31, 32, 33, like just simple foundational doctrines, but I wanted them to see this beautiful thread I had discovered, and they didn't see it. And so just be careful that you're teaching the obvious.
Do you have, just one last thing, not to harp on this point, do you have any advice on finding just the obvious so you don't get distracted by the smaller lessons?
Yeah, don't do what we're doing right now. And this is what I'm saying, is when you read and you fly over a chapter, there are going to be obvious principles there. Verse 7 is the obvious principle, okay? I do this for a wise purpose. That if my daughter goes to seminary, I want her to learn verse 7. If she comes home with me saying, Dad, what did you learn today in seminary, Emma? Well, you know when they pass down the plates to all the kings? Like, I know who every king was. And I might go, that's really cool. Like, not asking this derogatorily, but so what? Meaning, what's the lesson? Verse 7 seems to be a way easier so what than here's a list of all the kings and things like that. So you want them to understand sufficient context and content to be able to identify principles. That's straight from the handbook. Okay? So you don't want to leave it undone to the point that you do it so shallowly that they're like don't even get what the principle is, but you don't want to overdo it to where it becomes the core of the lesson, is also the exact handbook lesson, or statement. So you guys are really affecting my preparation, right? And this is what happens as a principal, just so you know. This is like, no, just kidding, go ahead.
Well, I think the answer to all of this, and then hopefully we can move on, is exactly what we taught yesterday. Is it current, is it continuous, and is it like correlated? So I had the same problem, like I want to know all the things, I want to know all the details, but is that really continuous? Like, have we been learning about those kings for hundreds of years? Or have we been learning about 7? Like, have we been learning about like the will of God, all of those things, the current? So I think that can kind of be our guideline, those filters that we learn.
Awesome. Okay, let's do one more.
Yeah, I just have a different question. Is there, I know you're waiting to get to number 5, but is there a problem with having the curriculum open while you're studying?
Yeah, and let me tell you maybe the issue with it. And there's a reason why I think Brother Haas says what he says. Is if you're teaching the curriculum without doing what we're doing right now, it's just not going to be as good. Now, you are wise enough to understand that this would take a lot less time if you were personally doing this in your office, right? But you have to understand and go in and see and be like, wow, that's cool. That's really great. Instead of just going to the curriculum, you're going to see that the curriculum's not going to come up with some crazy thing that you and I haven't thought of. Okay, but you'll see what the curriculum does when we prepare this way. So maybe hold off on that, and I'm going to ask you at the end, so why do you think it's beneficial to hold off for the curriculum? Okay? Brother Boyle.
I was just going to say, there's a fire that the scriptures will cause in you that isn't caused by the curriculum, which you can get good ideas from the curriculum and things, but there's power in studying the word directly that you don't get by studying the curriculum. I don't know how else to say that, but that's just personal experience. Like, I can go say, oh, that'll be cool to teach that. But when I go into the classroom and I'm teaching curriculum, I'm drawing them to ideas. When I go in there on fire for the scriptures, I keep pulling them back into the scriptures. Look at this. Look how cool this line is and this line is. We have to be converted to the word itself and use the curriculum as a confirmation, right? Not try to be converted to the curriculum.
Awesome.
Does that make
I'm going
sense?
to move on, okay? Just because I want to not just get through step 1 together. Okay? So let's finish Words of Mormon. Where were we? What verse? Yeah. And Tanner, you read?
Yeah, I can get it.
You read verse 12?
I read verse 11.
I'm on 12.
Okay, go ahead, Sierra. Verse 12.
And now concerning this king Benjamin, he had somewhat of contentions among the people.
It came to pass also that the armies of the Lamanites came down out of the land of Nephi to battle against his people. But behold, King Benjamin gathered together his armies, and he did stand against them. And he did fight with the strength of his own arm with the sword of Laban.
And in the strength of the Lord they did contend against their enemies, until they had slain many thousands of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did contend against the Lamanites until they had driven them out of all the lands of their inheritance.
And it came to pass that after there had been false Christs, and their mouths had been shut, and they punished according to their crimes.
And after there had been false prophets and false preachers and teachers among the people, all these having been punished according to their crimes, and after there had been so much contention and many dissensions among the Lamanites, behold, it came to pass that King Benjamin, with the assistance of the holy prophets who were among his people.
For behold, King Benjamin was a holy man, he did reign over his people in righteousness, and there were many holy men in the land. They did speak the word of God in power and with much authority, and they did use much sharpness because of the stiff-neckedness of the people.
Wherefore, with the help of these, King Benjamin, by laboring with all his might, with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets, did once more establish peace in the land.
Is there anything as far as contextually, content, that when you read that you just didn't understand it? Was it pretty clear? Someone put in their own words for me 12 through 18.
There's a lot of contention in the land, and they combated it with the power and authority of God.
Awesome. Who was at the head of that combating it? King Benjamin was, right? So when we get him in the next chapters, I might want my students to know that this old guy who's standing up on a tower to speak right now, who could barely speak, was once a mighty ruler, leader that went to battle with his people, and who drove out the Lamanites. And amidst of all these contentions and all of these dissensions that were happening, and all of these false Christs, this King Benjamin held it together. Okay, so I definitely want him to know that. Okay, awesome. So, step number 2. I didn't plug in my computer. Sorry. So step number 2 is we're going to look at this, and now we're going to say, okay, we've read Mormon chapter 1, or Words of Mormon 1. Do we feel like we understand it? How many of you feel like there's still things like, oh man, that's still really shaky in my head? Okay? I want to do something one time, and this is going to be what I would do if I were this right now. After all of that discussion, I want it clear in my head. I want to read it one time just quickly through. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. And I just want to read 1 through 18 without any commentary. I just want to read it again and see what's there. So let's start. Go ahead, Paul. Verse 1.
And now I, a Mormon, being about to deliver up the record which I have been making into the hands of my son Moroni, behold, I have witnessed almost all the destruction of my people that he caused.
And it is many hundred years after the coming of Christ that I deliver these records into the hands of my son. And it supposes me that he will witness the entire destruction of my people, but may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them and somewhat concerning Christ, and perhaps someday it might profit them.
And now I speak somewhat concerning that which I have written. For after I have made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi, in other words, large plates, down to the reign of this King Benjamin, of whom Malachi spake, I searched among the records which have been delivered into my hands, the small plates, and I found these plates, the small plates, which contain this small account of the prophets from Jacob down to the reign of this King Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi.
And
and the things which are upon these plates pleasing me because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ. And my fathers, knowing that many of them have been fulfilled, yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass.
Wherefore I chose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people.
For behold, I shall take these plates, which contain these prophesyings and revelations, put them with the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brother.
And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will.
And my prayer to God is concerning my brethren, that they may once again come to the knowledge of God, yea, the redemption of Christ, that they may once again be a delightsome people.
And now I, Mormon, proceed to finish out my record, which I take from the plates of Nephi, and make it according to the knowledge and the understanding which God has given me.
Wherefore it came to pass that after Malachi had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he took them and put them with the other plates, which contained records which had been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin.
And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they have fallen into my hands. And I, Mormon, pray to God that they may be preserved from this time henceforth. And I know that they will be preserved, for there are great things written upon them, out of which my people and their brethren shall be judged at the great and last day, according to the word of God which is written.
And now concerning this King Benjamin, he had similar contentions among his own people.
It came to pass also that the armies of Lamanites came down on the land of Nephi to battle against his people. Behold, King Benjamin gathered together his armies, and he did stand against them, and he did fight with the strength of his own arm, with the sword.
And in the strength of the Lord they did contend against their enemies, until they had slain many thousands of the Lamanites. And it came to pass they did contend against the Lamanites until they had driven them out of all the land of their inheritance.
And it came to pass that after there had been false Christs, and their mouths had been shut, and they punished according to their crimes.
Sure. And after there had been false prophets and false preachers and teachers among the people, and all these having been punished according to their crimes, and after there having been so much contention and many dissensions away unto the Lamanites, the Lord came to pass that King Benjamin, with the assistance of the holy prophets who were among his people,
For behold, King Benjamin was a holy man, and he did reign over his people in righteousness. And there were many holy men in their land, and they did speak the word of God with power and authority. They did use much sharpness because of the stiff-neckedness of the people.
Wherefore, with the help of these, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets, did once more establish peace in the land.
Okay, so let's read number 2 up here. How many of you feel right now like, I'm pretty familiar with Words of Mormon, I feel good about what's in there, and okay? So now let's ask this number 2. Go ahead, Cameron, you're our slide reader.
What are the principles or truths that are packaged for application and which, if understood, will lead to obedience? Study the larger doctrinal context of the passage. Mark each principle differently than you mark the details. If the principles are applied, take the time to write them down.
Okay, so with that, what do you think are the lessons here? If you look over the verses again, and I want you to point me to a verse and say, this is a principle I would want my students to understand. Go ahead, Josh.
We're just going right back to verse 7.
Okay.
Saying even if we don't know why the Lord wants us to do certain things, it's for a wise purpose.
Awesome. Okay, so you want them to understand. Say it one more time.
Even though we don't always understand, if the Lord wants us to do something, it's for a wise purpose.
Awesome.
I think that when we're, in verse 8, he's talking about how and my prayer to God is concerning my brethren. I think that a lot of times when we're under the influence during the prayer, we'll be motivated to pray on behalf of somebody else.
Okay, so a principle there is when we're under the influence of, how did you say?
When we're under the influence of the Holy Ghost, we will be prompted or motivated to pray on behalf of somebody.
Okay, so if we wanted to teach that principle, we would mark, I have verse 7 marked. My prayers concerning my brother. What did he say we should do if it's an implied principle, which that one is? Write it down in there. Okay? So we might write in our scriptures there, when we are under the influence of the Spirit. We often, what was it, Matthew?
Will be motivated or feel prompted to pray on behalf or for somebody.
All right, what other principles do you see? Look for the obvious, okay? Obvious, and I'm not saying, I just want to make sure we get the obvious principles here. So Tyler.
Prophets prophesy of Christ, and those prophecies are always fulfilled.
Okay, where is that? What verse?
4, just
Yeah.
him talking about how he's seen them.
Okay, obvious, if you were to sit down, and this is one filter that I love to pass all these through, okay? If we were to sit down with Mormon and say, hey, I'm teaching Mormon 1. So what did you want them to get? Do you think you'd say verse 4? I do too. Right? Now, is that all we teach? No. But verse 4, well, I want them to know that God fulfills his prophecies. Awesome. Anything else? Yeah. I didn't realize when I was doing what I was doing how big of a deal it would be because of Mark Harris. Right? I mean, don't you think Mormon would say that in verse 7? I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm doing this because it whispereth me, is the phrase. I feel the prompting to do it. So I'm going to do that. Awesome. Verse 4, verse 7, what else? Yes?
At the end of verse 2, that perhaps someday it may profit them. I think in the work of the Lord, sometimes you plant seeds and sometimes you reap the harvest. And so even though Mormon's not seeing all of these things come to pass, he has the faith that his effort in the work of the Lord will profit future generations.
Awesome. Wonderful.
In that same verse, if we go up just before, it says, but may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them. And then it goes down into that perhaps someday it may profit them. The power of the scriptures, he's living in a time in which he's seen his people totally become wicked, but he still wants the word of God to be preserved because he knows it has the power to change people.
Awesome. Andrea?
It's okay. I just think in 14, that God will protect his people from their enemies.
And where is that? What phrase would you mark?
In the strength of the Lord, they did contend against their enemies, and then at the end, until they had driven them off the lands of their inheritance.
In the strength of the Lord.
In verses 14 and 15, it talks about how King Benjamin, with the prophets, was able to establish peace in the land. So we could talk about how, by following the words of the prophets, we can have peace in our lives.
I think it's even maybe a little bit larger lesson than that, because all the way from 12 to the end of the chapter, it seems like almost the whole block there is Mormon showing us that King Benjamin, by doing those things, he was able to take a contentious people and turn them into a peaceful people.
And what are those things?
Well, it's listed as you go down. It's he fought with the strength of his own arm and the strength of the Lord. They contended with their enemies. They drove them out of the land of their inheritance. They punished the false Christs, shut their mouths, and so forth. And it keeps going on down there. They fought with the prophets, and so forth.
Awesome. So could we ever have a principle that was like, if we look for all these things, then we could establish peace? Awesome. So that might be one of those almost bulleted lists.
Going along with that, like the implied principle, I like connecting 16 and 18 together. And after there had been, it lists like all of these false prophets and false Christ and everything like that. This is after all of this, King Benjamin with the holy prophets, and then that's how we get to the peace. And so I think it's interesting, they punished all of those bad things. It talks about, all of 15 and 16, the punishments according to their crimes. But it doesn't really get to and then there was peace until they combated with spirituality. So I think making that point about punishment doesn't always have the same like results as spiritual like conversion. Punishing someone doesn't lead to conversion, whereas a spiritual focus does.
Okay, with all these now, we got some good principles in here, okay? Now we have to ask ourselves a question. And it's number 3. Okay, so let's read number 3. Joseph, read number 3.
Okay. Look at the passage once again, this time through another lens, and ask, how is this passage calculated to draw my attention to the Savior? What is here that leads to a greater understanding of gratitude for our reliance upon Him and Heavenly Father's plan?
So there's kind of these 2 filters. I don't know if you see it. In number 2, it's like, what's relevant to teenagers? What's going to help them? And what's going to draw them to the Savior? Okay, so of all the principles that we've talked about in Words of Mormon, which ones do you see like helping them? Think of high school. Like, which one is going to really help them deal with what they deal with in junior high and high school? Do you see any? Yeah.
I think a couple of the ones that we talked about with following the words of the prophets and like God fulfills His prophecies are very important to teenagers right now with the things that they're going through with all of the contention and things they see in the world. Following the words of the prophet will bless them.
Awesome. Okay, following the words of the prophet. Where would you stick that? Verses 14 through 18?
Yeah, and then also verse 4 with God fulfilling His prophecies. Yeah, and then 14 through 18.
Awesome. Awesome. Go ahead.
I think with verse 7, when I was a teenager, it was very comforting to know, like, I don't know why I have to do this stuff that I'm doing, but I'm going to do it because I have faith that it's all going to be okay in the end. And I think that was a really huge one for me, that I don't know why I can't go to Starbucks with my friends and drink coffee, but I'm not going to do it, and I have faith that it's going to be okay. So.
Do you think that's a teenage thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the most popular question that I'm asked by my 13-year-old daughter right now. Why? Or why not? Okay, and there are times where you just say what to your kids? Because. Right? And now I'll say that more because I'm annoyed with you. No. She won't see this video. Okay, so awesome. We have, I'm hearing emerging, verse 4, God is going to fulfill all of His prophecies. Verse 7, sometimes we don't know why God wants us to do something, but we just have to have the faith to do it. And verses 14 through 18, kind of coupled with verse 4 there, if we'll follow the holy men, we'll have peace. Right? That's what brings peace in the land. Okay, so let's just go with those 3. Okay, let's read number 4 now. And taking those 3 principles, let's take number 4. What have the modern prophets been teaching recently? Let's just take number 4, or verse 4. All of the prophecies of the holy prophets are going to be fulfilled. Has anything in your mind been taught recently about that, or is there an example of that, or something like that from modern prophets? Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, just they've said how the Family Proclamation came out years in advance before it was needed. Now needed.
Now, Brother Boyle and I are about the same age. We were in high school, or just out of high school when the Family Proclamation was given my senior year of high school. And when it was given, I'll be honest, it was not big news. It just wasn't. I mean, it was a talk at General Conference, at the women's conference. He read it there first, at the General Relief Society meeting. If you're thinking it was some groundbreaking announcement and that all the youth were like, did you hear about the Family Proclamation? It was not like that. Do you remember it at all, Brother Boyle?
It was so like, duh. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't everybody believe and live this way?
Yeah. Okay. So there's an example, and that's 1995, when people are looking at me and crying and talking about how wicked the world was, and I'm so glad I wasn't born in your day, and you are the chosen generation, and that is true. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, people were wondering how the world could get any worse than it was. I remember that sentiment, much like we hear today sometimes. Great example. Yeah, I might want to. Now, here's the thing that might bring a little. Do you remember how the proclamation ends? We warn
individuals who violate covenants of fast and your abuse spouse or offspring who fail to fulfill family responsibilities when they stand accountable before.
Okay, this is the part. Listen to this part, though. Okay.
Further, we warn that individuals, the disintegration of the family will bring upon individuals, communities, and nations the calamities foretold by ancient Bible prophets.
Start from the start.
Now, if what?
My wife and I memorized the whole thing.
If what verse 4 is saying is true, which I know it is, then the end of the family proclamation should be something we're very familiar with, right? It's a warning, and he says, as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day, have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. And so what the Lord prophesies is going to happen. I think family proclamation would be awesome to bring in with chapter 4. Yeah.
I think even Elder Holland has a quote that's like, don't you quit, you keep going, hoping good things to come, or believe that there are good things to come. A quote like that, even though it doesn't expound on some great principle, it's kind of the same principles put into terms that apply to the teenagers, you know? It's like, you know what? You can have hope in God's prophecies and what he has promised us because of X, Y, and Z, and this is what Elder Holland has to say about it. And I think that resonates with teenagers when it's put into a quote from a current apostle or prophet that they've heard and they know, and they've seen it on Pinterest, and they've seen it on Instagram, and I don't know, they love those little tiny cute quotes with the cool words and fonts, but
Awesome.
I think that's a cool way to drive home the principle.
Awesome. So something's coming to mind real quick. Hold on for 1 second. And do you have another prophecy?
No, I was going to. Well, yes, behold.
I was going to say one and I didn't want you, so go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say with the family proclamation we were talking about earlier, we used the visual lesson about what the plates were, putting that piece of paper in there. We could have them then take the family proclamation and glue it into a place in their scriptures and say this is modern prophecy.
Awesome.
And the prophets have inserted that into our doctrine now.
Awesome. So those things will start to emerge. The hows, as Brother Hunt talked about. One how I'm thinking of right now, because do you see how we can now go, boo, and do a sweet gainer off of, and just go dive off, and it would be a great experience, but we aren't going to teach Mormon. But I think of the Sabbath day. Does anyone remember in the first Sabbath day training, Elder Nelson introduced it and said, why this will happen if we keep the Sabbath day more holy? What was it? Does anyone know even why we're keeping the Sabbath day holy?
Increase faith, right?
Faith in Christ will increase. Okay, so even something like, I love what Sierra is saying, it doesn't have to be calamities, though that is one, but maybe, so what I'm thinking about the how is I might create just 3 slides. How many of you know what this is? The prophets and apostles said, read the last paragraph of the proclamation. So here's Mormon looking back, right, over hundreds of years of history and saying, holy cow, I just want you to know everything they've said has happened. And when we consider that principle, and everything they say in the future is going to happen, look what they've said. Family proclamation. Look what they've said, Elder Holland. If you keep going, this will happen. Is this true in individual lives just as much as it is for the church as a whole? It is. Look what they said about the Sabbath day. And And I'm talking 3 slides that take 30 seconds each. You know what I'm saying? So the hows are starting to come as we get the principles, okay? So that's through verse 4. Yes, and then yes.
I was just gonna say, another apostolic warning was Elder Bednar about the use of technology. It's also relevant to teenagers. He says, with this, we talked about flooding the earth with the gospel through technology, and he says, along with that, I give an apostolic warning with that.
Awesome. Wonderful. One more, then we're going to move on to the other principles.
I was gonna say, I just think it's kind of cool to do it this way because you just gave like several examples of different prophecies that mean different things, and that kind of ties them all back in, like we talked about earlier. Like you need to find the relevance to like other things that. That's
Awesome. So we don't want to make it, the reason why doing maybe 3 separate quick quotes is I don't want it to be a family proclamation lesson. What's the focus? What's verse 4? What's the principle? The prophecies of God will be fulfilled. Okay, and so we want to bring home that principle. We don't want them walking out, what was your lesson on today? Oh man, the family's disintegrating and it's going to bring upon nations. Even though that's not bad, but that's not what he's teaching is the prophecies of God will be fulfilled. Okay, let's take verse 7. What if modern prophets and apostles or experiences or things have you seen that relate to verse 7? This idea that sometimes we don't understand everything, but we just have to do it. Yeah.
Well, kind of going back to, somebody said it earlier, but a lot of the standards of the church about why we can't go to certain places, do certain things, for a teenager that doesn't make any sense. And so just trusting that the standards of the church are there for a reason.
Awesome.
And we should keep them.
So my mind goes to the first page of the For the Strength of Youth pamphlet. When the prophets and apostles, they promise, if you will live these standards, and they make certain promises there. Not only does that relate to verse 4, but there are many things in the For the Strength of Youth pamphlet that maybe some youth wonder. Like what? We make each other stronger. Why can't we study day? It's actually good for us. And there might be questions like why? Why not? Like maybe, now here's Mormon who's very obedient going, I don't know exactly why God wants me to put this in here, but I am, and it's awesome. And so how could we have a Mormon-like attitude? And when you look at, maybe reading something from the For the Strength of Youth pamphlet and saying, sometimes there may be standards in here that you don't completely understand. But let's read this promise from the prophets, what they've said and why they've given us these standards. So we may not understand some of the things God asks us to do, but we need to do them. Now, do you see where I'm not going with the For the Strength of Youth pamphlet? Tell me how we jump off the diving board. Yeah, okay, I'm going to pass out. You guys are dating. You guys are entertainment and the media. You guys are this, you guys are that, you guys are this, you guys are that. And take this right now, and I want you to underline everything that teenagers might not understand. And then oh yeah, okay, so let's talk. And now, what is our lesson on? For the Strength of Youth. What are we supposed to teach? So we're trying to use that as an example, and you could do it in a more subtle, you don't have to take the whole thing to say just what are some of the things in here that might, and take a few of them, okay? So go ahead, then we're going to move on to the last principle.
Yeah,
and
I
we'll
was
come to
gonna
you,
say,
Matthew.
A couple other cool quotes that go with this one is like, first not your doubts, read not your faith. Or like Elder Holland's talk on Lord I believe, and talking about like, even though you don't understand everything, but that's okay.
Awesome. Awesome. There are some specific quotes about not understanding everything, especially in that Holland quote, right? Elder Holland quote. Awesome.
Elder Uceda, 2 conferences ago, talked about how he got a prompting. They were in Machu Picchu visiting on their P-Day, and he got a prompting not to let the zone go down this one area. And he's like, why? He didn't understand why. And so he let him go anyway. And then what ended up happening was he ended up almost falling off the cliff in one particular spot. This other missionary got a prompting to hold back a little bit as he was passing. and the only reason I remember this is because it's Peru where I served my mission, but the other missionary got a prompting to hold back, and he later found out that that missionary got the prompting to hold back, maybe not understanding why, so that he could grab him before he fell.
So there will be these personal, that brings it down not to, maybe not all of us are going to be Mormons, but that story does a great job of making it relevant to us, right? Awesome, awesome. That would be a great story to put up there about maybe some real life types of things. Okay, now for time's sake, and I hope you realize if I was in my office, this would have been a lot more efficient. Do you catch that? But I also hope you realize that it might not be as good as it's turning out to be. And so there is strength in collaborating with people, talking with your spouses and friends, and hey, what about this, and what do you think about this, and what conference talks come to mind? Like, because I wouldn't have thought of that one. And now if I were teaching this, I would want to show that clip from that conference talk to bring it down to relevance, to where you're gonna maybe receive promptings or commandments or whatever and not really understand why you might be doing it. But I hope we're like Mormon. You see how we're landing back in there? He doesn't know exactly why, but he does it, okay? Now, for fun, now we've done this. Do you feel, how many of you right now, if I were like, oh, I just got a call, and one of you needs to go teach Mormon 1, or Words of Mormon, how many of you, even doing the preparation we've done so far, would feel pretty confident going and teaching this right now? Okay? Me too. All right? But now we're going to turn to the curriculum. Okay? So let's do that together. And then Tyler's going to answer the question that he asked me. Okay? And I literally, for time's sake, I'm going to read the curriculum to you through verse 7. Okay? Ask Words of Mormon 1 through 11. Ask students to think about a time when the Spirit prompted them to do something. You may want to have them write about this experience in their scripture study journals or class notebooks. To help them think about their experience, you may want to share a brief experience of your own. Let students know that later in the lesson you will ask a few of them to share their experiences with the class. Explain to the students that today they will study the example of someone who followed a prompting even though he did not understand all the reasons why he needed to do it. Have students turn to the Words of Mormon and find, at the bottom of the page or in the chapter summary, the approximate date when Mormon wrote the book. That's a good idea. Okay? And ask them to compare that date with the dates for the books of Omni and Mosiah. What do we learn about the Words of Mormon from these dates? Well, that's a pretty good idea to kind of put it in context, I think. Display the picture of Mormon in the abridged plates. Invite a student to read Words of Mormon 1 through 2. Help students understand that Mormon wrote the book titled Words of Mormon after most of the events in the Book of Mormon had happened. Explain that Words of Mormon helps us understand that the Book of Mormon was compiled from various records. It also shows that revelation guided the process. To help students visualize how Words of Mormon, the small plates, the Mormon's abridgment of the large plates, and of Nephi fit together in the Book of Mormon, consider showing them the chart titled The Plates and the Relationship to the Published Book of Mormon in the appendix at the end of this manual. So that might be really good kind of to do. And I would look that up right now, but I'm not going to. Okay? Assemble 2 books and 1 piece of paper.
He's been translated.
He was taken out. That was the last thing he had to teach us.
On the spine of the thinner book, attach a strip of paper labeled Small Plates. On the other spine of the thicker book, attach a strip of paper labeled Mormon's Abridgment of the Large Plates. On the piece of paper, write Words of Mormon. To use this visual aid in class, hold up the book, you get the picture. That sounds great, right? And so, okay, have students read, I'm skipping a little, Words of Mormon 4 through 6 to learn how Mormon felt about the small plates. What did Mormon find pleasing in the small plates of Nephi? What did Mormon do with the small plates of Nephi? Okay, now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. My voice is giving out and time is giving out. Okay? But do you see, how many of you have had, after, Tyler, I want you to answer this question now. After having that experience already, why would you want to have that experience that we had before reading this as opposed to going to this first? What might be the advantage?
I'm not sure this is the answer, Bruno, but as
I'm looking for a specific one. No,
well, as we were going through each step, I was getting more and more and more excited about like this scripture itself, and I was like getting really anxious to think about like how I was going to teach it and like imagining like teaching it from my class and how I'd do it. And then reading through the lesson, I can't remember exactly where it was at, but like just kind of how it laid out, like how Mormon or when Mormon like wrote this and everything. Like it kind of was like, oh, that would be a cool way to teach that now, and then that kind of like made sense of what I was already excited to teach about.
Awesome. See, do you see how this very much becomes a supplement? And you're going, oh, that would be great. A lot of times on the online version, like Brother Hunt said, with this, if you just want to make a note, that video is very good. Like students get it after that video. It is so well done. But if you go through this, and so let's see how we did on our principles, by the way. Here's the first principle that they suggest teaching. The Lord knows all things, and the Lord can work through us to accomplish His will. Okay, here's the second principle. When we follow the inspired leadership of prophets, we can establish peace. I wish we would have come up with that. But tell me, was that better than we came up with? It's worded very well. I mean, we talked about it, that's exactly what we were saying, but we didn't get paid for 40 hours a week to sit there and word craft that over and over again, okay? In the strength of the Lord, we can overcome challenges. We are called to labor with all our might to establish peace. Okay, so that's from those things. Now, if we had more time to read through all the curriculum, I would say this. I would go through these steps, and I would read word for word the whole curriculum. After going through that, I would read the whole curriculum. There's a reason why, because those little things like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that thing with the book. That's a great way to do it. I love the way that principle's stated. That's a great question. Yeah, I'm going to have them look at the dates. Okay? Now this has all taken us a little bit longer. It's taken us an hour and a half to do that. But there was a lot of other commentary. Okay? I think without you guys here, sounds sad, but you know what I mean. Do you think we could have done that individually in 45 minutes-ish? So now, at this point, we're 45 minutes in-ish, maybe 50. But if I were to now tell you, you have a half an hour to kind of get the what together, to get this in a lesson plan, write out some carefully crafted questions, how many of you think you could do it in a half an hour? Okay? And so these steps from Brother Hawes, this is the way I prepare now. It makes it simple for me, and I really think it allows me to teach lessons that have the depth necessary. And also, if you go straight to the curriculum, one thing that, Brother Boyle hit on this, but one thing that I think you miss is the ligaments of the chapter sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Like, those things that connect, the connective tissue. There's a reason why verses 1 through 3 are there. And when you read through it 2 or 3 times, and you're asking yourself those different questions as you do each read, it will be a major blessing to you. Now, I want to give one caveat to this. There are times when you're teaching Old Testament year, the book of Ezra, 12 chapters. That would be the time when I would look and say, let's see where the curriculum settles down. Like, what chapters should I dive into and really study well? Because you aren't going to have time to study 12 chapters. It might be that way a little bit with some of the war chapters, where the message is contained in Alma, 45 through 60 or whatever. Might be your block. I'm not saying it is or anything like that, but there might be some big blocks. At times it's good to go and look at where the curriculum settles down. So this isn't like you have to feel guilty, like it's a bad magazine if you pull out the curriculum before you've read the scriptures. It can be done in concert with one another, and you could use wisdom. But you get the principle of don't be so reliant upon the curriculum that you're teaching it like a script, or you'll be a little dry. And I'll be honest, I think what we came up with is a little bit more engaging than the curriculum, and that should be the case because this is for a worldwide, and some of the things we came up with the proclamation and the Elder Hall and Mormon message, and I forget the third one. Yeah. Okay. Well, I meant the prophecies are all fulfilled. Oh, Sabbath day on that one. Okay. I think that would be engaged, and kind of just quick and show, and that might be more engaging than what the curriculum has, which will often be the case. But every now and then you'll see something in the curriculum and you'll go, "Wow, that's an awesome idea," or "That's an awesome video," or whatever. So that wasn't done perfectly, but I really think going through these 5 steps will bless you as you prepare you to teach in a way that will be powerful to your students. And so say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
I want to take a quick roll just to make sure that as we make these assignments, everyone's here for them. Lacey and Daniel and Joseph Terry and Adam James and Sergio and Josh Fuller and John Stone and Cole Morgan and Sidney Taylor and Anthony Bergen still here and Andrew Pace and Chris Ross. Jacob Fletcher's not here anymore, right? But you reached him. Okay.
I texted him.
Brian Robbins is here, and Cameron Starr, right there. Sierra is here. Matthew Jones still here. Oh, but we gave that to you. We gave it today. Jordan Ellsworth was not here today, right? Okay. Tyler Smith, where are you, Tyler? Right here. And Andrea Jimenez, Grant Miriam, Matthew De La Fuente, Hannah Julian. Wyatt Moore has not been here. Tanner Bennett left, but I gave him his assignment. Josh Woolley, Michaela Cottrell, Joseph Riley. Great Joseph. Oh, yeah, right there.
Michaela might not be here tomorrow.
Will not be here.
She won't be here.
In the morning, won't be here?
At all.
Okay, at all, okay. Sorry, just making calling an audible here for a second. Will be here, Derek will be here. Okay. What we would invite you to do now, I'm going to be passing around this piece. In fact, I'll ask a couple of you to, if you just give a copy back to everybody. We're going to turn the remainder of the afternoon over to you. And you're going to prepare a 25-minute mini lesson. 25-minute mini lesson. And the block that you're assigned to teach is on this piece of paper. So today you'll be looking at the rows. Tomorrow you'll be dealing with the columns. That make sense? So if my name is Josh Fuller, then I'm going to look on this document and find my name. And I'm going to look on the row, and I'm teaching Mosiah 18.